I'm with the second most handsome doctor in the world, both with a fresh fade modelled on my spirit animal that you can see behind me. Asif, welcome to the Propane Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
So thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting to you over the last few months, and I've been in contact with you for the last few years. I think 2014 when I got married, I did message yourself and Johnny regarding getting me into shape, and as you can see, it has worked wonders. So thank you for that.
Oh man, well you put in all the work. We were just telling you what to eat, but yeah.
That's when my relationship started with Propane, guys. So fantastic. Well done, guys. Thank you for having me. I've been a big fan over the years. You've had some great guests, and I hope I can do you some justice and give your listeners some value.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's like back in the golden age, and it's also great to see that you fit in this talk before actually filming for a BBC documentary. You said too.
That's right. Yeah. So I've been contacted by BBC Stories to do just a bit of a fact-checking exercise, really, on a recent documentary they're doing regarding cryptoheptidine, which is a anti-allergy supplement, essentially, but it's been used in America by lots of influencers to, female influencers really, to put on some weight around their curves, so to speak, humps and bumps. So it's an anti-allergy supplement. As you know, anti-allergy supplements cause sedation. The ones you get from Boots can cause sedation and sleepiness. But this one does that as well. But when you wake up, apparently, it stimulates appetite. So it has been used by vets in the past to stimulate appetite in cats who are rather ill and frail. So it's been used, so to speak, by certain influencers in America to put on, to get lean in the gym firstly. Diet and nutrition, as we know, is very important. But to put on weight around the right areas. Some of these so-called influencers are using kind of pseudoscience and quackery to abuse this drug. So basically, I've got recently to...
So this is a veterinary antihistamine that they're using to...
Use it as well, yeah. So it's cryptoheptidine. The name is amphetamine. Amphetamine, it's called. Active ingredients in cryptoheptidine, but it's got a lot of B vitamins in there as well. Essentially, so it's used in humans. It's prescribed. It's kind of a third or fourth line antihistamine after sinazine and cetirizine and the Piriton, etc. It is used, but certainly not the first choice for most doctors in the country. But it's first choice for a lot of people in the States who are now using it for these aforementioned benefits. But in the UK, it's gaining a bit of traction in the black market. Hence why I think BBC were quite interested in a documentary.
And this is something people are using to get that booty just by increasing their appetite. Is there anything specific to curves, or is it just global weight gain?
It is global weight gain, but obviously a lot of these girls are super fit with their kind of musculature, so they've got very low body fat. So it is putting on fat, but a lot of girls don't realise that you can't get fat in the breasts. Mammary tissue, as you know, you said yourself, is different to kind of adipose tissue. So that's something. That's just a kind of a aside as to black market drugs at the moment. But main one over the last 20-30 years, since the proliferation of bodybuilding with Arnie in the 80s and 70s, has been use of what we call AAS, so anabolic androgenic steroids, particularly with last 5 years, where it's just ballooned with the rise of social media and reality TV with Love Island and Big Brother and all these kind of things, where people do it a bit more ripped and a bit more toned. So that's been the big black market kind of issue at the moment.
So I'm keen to dive into the different kind of subcategories of drugs, because I guess in terms of ergogenic aids that you're talking about, there's a huge range of different classes of drugs that are used for different purposes, and the one you've just mentioned, I've not even heard of, using an antihistamine to stimulate appetite and get that booty. Is new to me. Just before we go on, for anyone who doesn't know you, you are Dr. Munaf. What is your kind of background?
Yes, I'm currently a sports medicine registrar in the East Midlands, having completed medical training. 8 years ago now, 2012, finished my medical school training there. I've trained in a variety of sports and kind of NHS positions, mainly looking at athletes and kind of general well-being and wellness. But my main interest at the moment is I'm going to go part-time. to concentrate on my business, which is called Endurance, essentially a wellness clinic, mainly looking at men's health, doing blood testing and IV vitamin therapy, but also generally looking at people who want to get into better shape. So as doctors, as Yusuf, will probably agree, we are used to treating illness rather than wellness. Yusuf's other interest is PT, which I am as well. So, being a PT, you look at optimizing someone's wellness and general fitness. Whereas in NHS, you tend to be rather reactive, and that's what medical school teaches you, to react to illness, as opposed to being more upstream. So my background, is in medicine, but I did take a year out of med school and did a public health master's, which, certainly equipped me with quite a lot of knowledge and know-how as to preventing illness and maximizing wellness. And one of the biggest things we can do is optimize people's nutrition, make sure they are exercising adequately, and also just generally looking at for deficiencies and dispelling a lot of myths that people are having, because people, general population, are very suggestible to social media suggestions with regard to this drug, that drug will do this, and X, Y, and Z. So the clinic involves of dispelling myths.
I think that's such a great initiative because, yeah, exactly. Like there is a curve of like you're riding this wave of people being interested in wellness, but having to only rely on either marketing from supplement companies or Karen from Facebook, who's like an anti-vaxxer and believes that Western medicine is a scam, and there's so, because of this asymmetry of information, I really feel, and like before I started medical training as well, like my bullshit alarm was so much less sensitive that you see someone throw out a couple of scientific terminologies and you're thinking like, oh my god, that must be right. Like I've got no metric to compare this against, nothing to, and so you end up just being, it's not even like gullibility, it's just like people are deliberately misleading you in terms of effects, side effects, benefits of various diets and supplements and everything, and we've got no kind of intellectual defense to be able to measure that against something objective. So I think doing what you're doing with basically a accredited medical approval is exactly what people need.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it was about time with, the Karens from Facebook and your Debbies from mumsnet.com. We're just, spouting absolute quackery. And it's not just that, it's just the guys in the gym as well, the bro science dudes, the meatheads, the juice heads who are injecting steroids with shared needles and saying this will do this to them, and, taking L-carnitine and caffeine supplements, etc., etc., with absolutely zero backing from medical science. And even then, when they are kind of really, weak and tenuous scientific studies done, they don't necessarily have the medical or intellectual or even the critical appraisal ability to look at the effect curves and say, look, actually, this is a really poorly designed study which has been funded by GSK or by USN Nutrition or by, Gold's Gym in America, really. So, and I think people are buying into stats and buying into curves and graphs without necessarily looking at the side effect profile. Because a lot of these meds and supplements do have side effect profiles, which it may not be necessarily right for you.
Well, people are kind of trapped as well, because even if they want to get medically accredited information, they want to go to their GP. Like, particularly in the UK, there is just no support for that. Like, I think in the US there is much more of a focus towards optimizing wellness and health, and many more people are on like testosterone replacement therapy, or it's much more consumeristic in the way that like you go to your doctor and you're like, I want this because I think that I've got this, and they'll be like, all right, we'll do CT, full body, and prescribe you whatever you like. Whereas it does seem like we're more defensive in the UK, but as a result, we get this, like, so you were saying about like the difference between, like trying to mitigate illness versus improving performance. We end up with like the fitness industry criticizing doctors for I saw a tweet this morning that said doctors are too lazy to give diet advice to diabetics, and they don't have any recognition of how carbs impact diabetes, and they don't learn any nutrition, and it's like that comes from the perspective of like the doctors are too lazy to do it, compared to like the average patient just not being this uber woke Twitter warrior that's interested in like binaural beats and infrared saunas and minimizing their HbA1c, and really all what they actually want is like, doctor, don't tell me to stop smoking, like I know that, I just want the pill that's going to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that opens up a huge gulf. It used to be a small gap, but now I think it's a gulf actually between doctors' knowledge and lack of awareness of, you know, general fitness and well-being, and patients' kind of, miseducation on the internet, and that opens up a big gulf where black market activities occur, for all these kind of illicit substances, be it over-the-counter supplements which you don't need, or stuff which essentially is harmful to the kidneys. Like even this morning, I was looking at some blood results of this guy, private blood results, and this guy needs ultrasound scan of his liver because he's almost knackered his liver. And previously, from my experience, I've seen bodybuilders have huge clots in their liver, what we call portal vein thrombosis, essentially coming with tummy pain, and their blood levels are so high because they've just been abusing steroids for 3 years on end without cycling, which is what the norm is at the moment. And so doctors should know about this stuff.
Well, you're right. Like, this gulf is the perfect opportunity for supplement companies and black markets to jump in, because it's like the doctors are almost like, if you go to the GP and you say, "Oh, I'm thinking of starting to use steroids," mostly the GP will be like, "Oh, well, I don't think you should," and that's the end of the conversation.
Most of the GPs will probably think you mean prednisolone for your nose or something. Steroids. I don't think they have any clue about cycling or to use kind of broad terms, gear, juice, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the guys don't know about that necessarily. The 12 to 15 week cycles they do, then cruising and then offloading and then back on the juice again. A lot of these terms, because a lot of GPs and doctors don't go to the gym, and if they do, they're probably going to do a bit of cardio, just to keep up their fitness for the weekend. And I think this is a huge gap. But even in running, because I've worked in Loughborough before, and even some of the runners are using stuff as well. So
EPO and things.
Yeah, of course. And that was well known in the 90s for the cyclists, EPO and autologous blood transfusions. But there's doping in terms of imagery as well. Visual imagery is a form of doping. You've got doping in terms of Paralympians using carbon fiber, prosthesis, which is knocking off a few milliseconds from their sprint, and there's all sorts of doping which we wouldn't know about, and that's something I'm very much interested in, educating about doping, various forms of it, and now we as doctors can certainly educate ourselves about what people are doing, because a lot of women are buying over-the-counter supplements to lose weight, and they're coming in with sinus tachycardia and SVTs, essentially for all the non-medics out there, just in dangerous heart conditions, and they're coming in because they're using these kind of thermogenic agents to lose weight, and it's having a massive effect on their heart, and you can end up dead essentially.
That's interesting. So, like, without closing that gap, then you're going to have people saying, "I have an intention to do this." And if the doctor just says, "Don't do this," it's not most of the time the patient's not going to be like, "Oh, okay, I just won't use steroids." They'll be like, instead they're going to say, "Well, I'm just going to use them, but like using the information I found on a bodybuilding forum, or just I'm going to go it myself." And then they come into the complications that you've talked about, like the clots and the tachycardias and the arrhythmias and things. So yeah, I definitely see like there needs to be, with this quite new wave of people doing this kind of stuff, there has to be some information that covers that. Otherwise, we're leaving it entirely to the supplement industry to pick up that mess.
And yeah, precisely. And supplement industry is a form of a pharmaceutical industry, isn't it? So their interests are in profit. So, a bodybuilder who comes off steroids because he's got a clot is a customer lost. That's the way. Or a bodybuilder who's had a heart attack or who's had a stroke now because of anabolic steroid use and is now in a wheelchair and has stopped using anabolic steroids, is now a customer lost. So there needs to be a medical kind of upgrading or upskilling of the level of knowledge as to what ergogenic aids can do to the human body and physiology. And I think that starts in medical school, because that should be a compulsory module now. Some of the guys at NutriTank are doing some really good work with nutrition in the medical school curriculum. So Yusuf, you may have been one of the last ones, I think, to leave medical school with very kind of abysmal knowledge of nutrition, which
I think I was probably one of the, because I only qualified last year, so maybe it was just my med school, but they were pretty good with nutrition and metabolism. So
it's really good.
But I have heard people criticize med schools for not covering it much.
You must have been the first batch then, because I think 2012 onwards there was a bit more kind of drive to incorporate that into the curriculum, because you're right, I would say 60-70% of illnesses can be prevented with stress control, with better nutrition, with better, exercise regimes as well. And as doctors, we don't necessarily learn this in medical school, so we become very reactive. And the NHS is a health service, but it's essentially an illness service. It's a national sick service, isn't it? So it's NSS really, because you're treating sick patients essentially all the time. There's no remit for health. The big part of NHS is the health service, but I think we spend most of our budgets fighting complications of diabetes and arthritis and obesity further down the line, when all that money, billions of pounds you're looking at, could be spent earlier in what we call upstream interventions.
Oh, it really upsets me. Like, there's so many examples of this. Like, I've just come off a stroke job, and in the same vein, there's such a short-termist way of thinking of like, oh, rather than training more interventional radiologists to do thrombectomies to remove the clot from someone from a stroke, instead because that's too expensive, we just wait for people to have a stroke and we give them aspirin, which has a terrible, like really high number of people that you need to give aspirin to prevent. It's 8 in 1,000 apparently. So you give 8 people, you give 1,000 people aspirin, prevents 8 strokes, and the amount of millions of pounds that's being spent on ongoing care and the disabling effects on the patient for years afterwards, compared to just short-term investing more into training more people that can do this procedure and actually deal with it at the source. But yeah, with things like obesity as well, like it's so much more expensive to deal with someone once they're super obese and experiencing the complications than dealing with it at the source again. But I guess because whoever's in power now won't see the fruits of that, it doesn't make sense for them to invest in that line.
Yeah, certainly. I think government terms are very short, 4 years in the UK. So government policy is very short and sharp in terms of its where the money goes to, and I think these long-term effects, because you're looking at 20 years. So if you educate a 8-year-old child about the risks of eating too much, candy and fizzy pop, that effect will bear fruit 30, 40 years later. By that time, the government will be changed. We'll have a different king or queen, things change rapidly. Physiologically, they can change rapidly, but in terms of government's policy, it doesn't bear fruit that quickly. So all the money and budgetary kind of focus goes on short-term measures. Waiting time, for instance, we've seen that 4-hour waiting times being slashed and being replaced, and a lot of money being spent on kind of getting patients home quickly, as opposed to at the other side of the spectrum, younger children who are being miseducated by adverts on TV regarding cereal and sugary drinks. Although that has improved as of 2018, nevertheless they are still bombarded with adverts and billboards about multinational companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, who are just propagating high sugar, high calorie foods all the time.
So it sounds like the main thing is that without the medical industry actually taking ownership over not just illness but over wellness as well, then it's completely left up to the whims of the private companies that have their own agendas to pursue and don't really have an aligned incentive or aligned agenda to prevent disease in the future. And this is what, it boggles my mind, like even things like smoking. Like, why is smoking still legal in 2020? Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I heard a GP about 10 years ago suggest that anyone born after the year 2000, we should just introduce a ban for anyone born after the year 2000. So then nobody who's a current smoker has to suffer or has to then suddenly have their freedom impinged on. And anyone who's born in year 2000 onwards, like, they just won't know any different, and there's no reason to continue creating new smokers from now. But that idea was just like swatted away.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the current smokers now, who are perhaps in their 50s and 60s and 70s, they were of the generation whereby smoking wasn't considered necessarily harmful. But now we know the ramifications of smoking in terms of not just lung disease, but hypertension, diabetes, strokes in the future, limb amputations. There's at least 20 conditions which can be attributed to smoking. Throat cancer, mouth cancer, colon cancer as well. Looking at long-term risks of smoking, and
it is the only poison which is sold. I can't see. I don't see any other poison. You're talking about poison here because that is literally poisoning your arteries and your organs from the inside out, which is sold legally.
It's insane. Like it's the only thing like definitively proven to to increase death. Like, yeah, it is insane.
And we're seeing the ramifications of that later on, 30, 40 years later when the lung cancer comes in and they've got to fly to Newcastle for a lung transplant, or, they've got COPD, recurring pulmonary oxygen, which is £8,000 a year. This is all NHS money, isn't it? Which is, it's bonkers to think we allow kind of the tobacco industry, the big pharma essentially, to sit on, kind of lobbying boards and, have say in government policy.
It is so true. So you mentioned before about like the different kind of range of sport supplements and ergogenic, legal and non-legal, I suppose, like regardless of the legality, some of the mechanisms are very similar. I guess it ranges from what we've just said, antihistamines, to stimulants, to appetite suppressants, to hormone boosters, or just pro-hormones or hormones themselves. Can you talk us through like some of the most common ones that you see in your clinical work, and what we have to kind of contend with in terms of supplements and new stuff that's coming out?
Yeah, so I think going back to the first point about what's the kind of stuff I see. So majority of my work is in men's health. So I see a lot of anabolic steroid users, and that's not just the guys who are competing, which used to be the case 30 years ago. For guys who were competing, the Dorian Yates, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, they were the guys who had the sole kind of a remit towards these medications, which were very hard to get by, because you have to get them from they were usually from horses, so equine steroids. They were purified and put in injectable form, and then they were shipped from Germany to Austria to UK. But now they're available across the UK in most gyms. In most gyms, you'll see guys using them. So that's the majority of the things I see. So AAS, anabolic androgenic steroids, which essentially stimulate what we call protein synthesis in the PMB, protein muscle synthesis. In kind of guys who use them. That's one of the things. So essentially for growth, we see growth hormone as well. So growth hormone, either injections, and people are taking tablets which they can buy over the counter, or from pharmacies online. I'm not sure of the efficacy of kind of tablets, but people have used them for, if you're, for example, dwarfism, or kind of early closure of the epiphyses, which are the growth plates. So, for instance, Lionel Messi, the famous footballer, he used growth hormone. His parents paid for treatment, hence why, because he was very short. He still is now, but you can get the medical use of growth hormone, which is an actual reason, but you can get the abuse of growth hormone just to put on mass and size, what they call hypertrophy, bodybuilding circles. So that's kind of two of the main ones. There's also testosterone patches and gels, which are quite common. So testoderm, testogel, another one which people use. You can put it on the mouth, put it on the arm, which is absorbed slowly. So people do that 3 times a day. The testosterone tablets people take as well. Again, that's kind of the 3 most common ones, and that's to build muscle, or to build aggression, to build kind of a competitive edge, which will allow you to lift more. If you lift more, you get stronger. So the theory goes, and then you can build more muscle. The other one, which I see a lot as well, is not just being big and having a combination of fat and muscle. It's actually having lean muscle. So a lot of bodybuilders are using, in between cycles of bulking, when they're on a cut, so to speak, 4 to 8 weeks before a competition, they're using medications to lose fat and lose water, really. So there's all sorts of diuretics, what we call the medicine, something to remove excess salt and excess water from the body. Some bodybuilders are being rather clever and using certain diuretics, like potassium-sparing diuretics, like spironolactone, which actually retains potassium in the body, hence you get more muscle definition. So bodybuilders are, always one step ahead of doctors. If you spoke to your usual doctor about spironolactone, sure, he'll tell you the dose, 25, 50 milligrams, but he wouldn't know why it's being used in bodybuilders.
I wouldn't touch spironolactone with a barge pole personally, but
yes, exactly. It's used in heart failure and it's used in alcoholic liver disease. But bodybuilders are using it now, and bodybuilders are using laxatives just to literally get rid of any excess, abdominal distension they may have before a competition. They're using, melanocyte kind of stimulators, MSH stimulators, such as a melanotan, which is, intramuscular injection to make their bodies a bit more tanned pre-competition. There's also use of thyroxine, especially in the lady bodybuilders, to up their metabolism and lose weight. There's use of caffeine as well, prior to workout. And it is allowed, obviously, by the WADA as well, but it's more than 400 micrograms, which is 8 cups of coffee. You can't have more than that, because then it becomes a class as doping, really. Sorry, Yusuf, I'm going through a little spiel here.
No, I mean, it's just insane, like the number, even just from the drugs you've mentioned there, potassium-sparing diuretics, pro-hormones, thyroxine, laxatives, caffeine, like the number of mechanisms that all of these drugs play with is insane. And these are all things that are mediated by negative feedback, where you introduce a huge amount of exogenous hormone, and then you're just completely buggering up the endogenous production of that going down the line. And it sounds like without the medical field taking ownership over this, you've just got individuals that are they've got the dashboard of their human body, and they're just playing with the knobs, doing different things, and not really being aware of the consequence, or once they come off, what's to happen. Have you seen anybody present to you with hypogonadism, so low testosterone, following steroid abuse?
Yeah, certainly. So actually, my interest in bodybuilding came about similar to yours during medical school. So when I was a fourth year, the good Sports Direct man mug, the 4-litre man mug.
Oh, the best. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one of them as well. Fantastic. So when I was a fourth year in Hull, which has not to kind of point fingers or generalise any community. Obviously now with the coronavirus, that's been in the news with kind of chastising certain communities, which is completely wrong. But I was in Hull, which is a huge Eastern European community, and obviously that is bodybuilding culture. Bulgaria, Arnie's from Austria. There's some big culture in
the best weightlifters, and
powerlifters are from Bulgaria and Romania, aren't they? And you've got the Scandinavians as well in terms of sports strongest man. So in Hull had a big community. I was at medical school there, and I was doing obs and gynae. So you think, why is obstetrics and gynecology relevant to bodybuilding? But I saw a lot of young men, relatively young, 35, 40, coming in with infertility, and they had, this is going back to 2010, so a decade ago now. There was very little knowledge about cycling, what people are doing now. So 15-week cycles, going off for a few weeks and coming back on it. So they were just on steroids, anabolic steroids, for 2 or 3 years constantly. And a lot of the stuff was imported, illegally from Romania and from other parts of Europe, where it's more purified. It's stronger stuff, really. So they were coming in with infertility. So male, not just low sperm count, but kind of abnormal sperm morphology, and not just azoospermia, which is low sperm count, but spermatic dysmotility and all kinds of dysfunctional sperm. And that was a lot of it was their natural testosterone levels were abysmal. So you're looking at 2, 3, and 4, and it should be minimum 9 to 10 for a man. And if you look at these guys, you'd think their testosterone level will be 20 or 30 because they're big, they're muscular, they're very aggressive. But it's coming down at 2 or 3, which is what you'd expect in a 13-year-old girl.
I see. So really, then, they've tanked it, and is that something that's recoverable in fertility clinics?
Yes. So you have to be, there's 2 things here. So what's more important to them? So that will slowly recover, like anything. Essentially, it's a form of hypogonadism. It's adrenal insufficiency. It's the whole hypothalamic pituitary axis is offset. So this is going into complex endocrinology now, but I wouldn't bore you with that. But it can recover, okay? And it will recover by itself, and it's better to let it recover by itself. If you're giving testosterone to boost a very low testosterone in someone who's effectively crashed with steroid use, you're just delaying the onset of their recovery. So you have to let it recover.
This is what kind of scares me, that you've got you've got the panel of different hormones, and as you said, you've got the whole hypothalamic pituitary axis that regulates all of the hormones, and yet somebody's gone in and just modulated one of them or just turned one of them way up. And so if the rest of them go out of kilter, or if they've then got a problem, it's like trying to replace the individual hormones may still not so I guess this is presumably this is why there's a higher incidence of depression and mental health issues.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Addisonian stuff as well,
Yeah.
but following that, because you've dysregulated the entire axis.
Yeah, precisely. And so hypogonadism is one of them, but depression is so common because your cortisol's all over the place, your mood is all over the place. You got this phenomenon of roid rage where it's very common in bodybuilders. Not just in the gym throwing their weights around, but killing their family members. There was a case of Chris Benoit a few years ago,
yeah.
Canadian wrestler. Killed his wife and child and killed himself. And there's a lot of suicide eventually, and there's a lot of there's been stabbings in nightclubs because of guys are on steroids, and it just dysregulates everything.
So this is all assuming that the compounds that these people are taking are what it says on the label. And I suppose the other side of all of this is that because sports supplements and especially imported black market stuff are not subject to the same level of scrutiny that pharmaceuticals are, in terms of quality control or studies based on safety profiles and cautions and all these kind of things, that a lot of the time someone could even be not getting what they think that they're getting. Yeah,
certainly, because a lot of these imported substances are not, as you say, under the strict guidance of MHRA, the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority. They are black market. They are slipped under they're slipped under people's noses and just passed around from gym to gym without having any efficacy profile at all. And yeah, you're right. It's the same as street drugs. So, intravenous drug use, which is commercially available drugs on the streets. A lot of them, people are taking heroin, but half the heroin is filled with cement and brown sugar, and but the person taking it is none the wiser. They're buying heroin at I don't know, a few £100,000 per kilo or whatever the price is. So however much they're buying in terms of grams, a bag of heroin, and 90% of it's not even heroin. It's the same as these anabolic steroid users. So a lot of them are what we call excipients. So they have a preparation, they have a solution, they have an excipient as well, and then they have the steroid in there, which I suspect forms 10-20% of the actual makeup of that syringe.
And there's no guarantee that the excipient has a decent safety profile, that it's not contaminated, that it's probably been carried across the country in someone's bum. Like it's So this is that is a bit of, and so I'm in Newcastle currently. I've heard that as cocaine comes through like the southeast of the UK and comes up north, like progressively lower and lower percentages, and so you're getting more Rennies and warfarin in your cocaine than actual cocaine. So so over the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years, there's been a bigger rise of selective androgen reuptake modulators and growth hormone peptides and these kind of new wave of drugs that are not quite anabolic steroids and still stand in a bit of a grey field in terms of WADA and legal issues as well. So we've got these new drugs that are claiming to be smart steroids, but have very, very small track record compared to the standard compounds. Have you seen much of those in practice, and what do you know about them?
Yeah, so I have seen them, but I would say probably only 20-30% of people actually have heard of them, the guys who are injecting steroids anyway. They are novel treatments, so something like exenatide, which is a insulin-like growth factor 1 agonist. People are using this, so it's not only is these kind of second stage from growth hormone to ILGF. It is the ILGF, so they are taking that as a tablet to boost their metabolism. And a lot of the so-called smart steroids are used by competitive bodybuilders, not necessarily the guys, your Tom, Dick, and Harry's in the usual muscle gym. And I think a lot of them are regulated by the coaches. So some of the coaches do have access to private blood testing. So they are a bit more aware than I am. What I usually see are the bread and butter steroids, the nandrolones, the stanozols, the climbuterates, which are usually used for fat loss as well, anti-asthmatic agent later. But the smart steroids are certainly getting traction, and that's something I'm slowly getting more familiar with. But kind of a growth hormone peptide agonists and kind of selective androgen receptor modulators as well, and even people are using, I've heard, stuff like ramipril as an ACE inhibitor as well. So they are getting very patchy endocrinology nuggets from different bodybuilding forums and putting it together and saying, I'll take the ramipril, it's going to help with kind of this and that.
I just think if there's something to learn in a patchy way, it's not endocrinology.
So it's one of the more complex medical specialities, and I think people are mixing that with a bit of bro science and anecdotal evidence, really. So my friend did this, he put on this much size, and he only cycled for 6 weeks, so it must work. And obviously not knowing and not controlling for confounding factors at the same time.
Well, a lot of these new things, especially the selective androgen modulators and GHRPs and things, like they seem to be more popular in the States as well, and there's a lot of kind of pro longevity and health guys that are recommending them as well. Not doctors. These are kind of like biohacking type people.
Wellness gurus and Silicon Valley with their rocket coffee and all these things.
Yeah, precisely. Like the kind of guys that are blending butter into their coffee, and it's like these things may well be fantastic, and actually on paper they look brilliant. Like, and I've been tempted. I've seen them and thought, like, these look really great. But then there's always the thought of the track record is so small, and from the preliminary data we're seeing, it looks like SARMs particularly still cause shutdown, whether it's as much or less so than steroids. Like, they're not the perfect drug, and so I think really in terms of trying to optimize performance and health, it's probably, as you said, like, if the risk that you're taking is at competitive bodybuilding level and you really need to enhance your performance at all costs, and you're willing to take those risks because you're really stepping into the unknown, not only with your own body, but also if something goes wrong and you've got to see someone like yourself, like the number of patients that are available and the amount of data available on these drugs is so narrow that even the experts are still in the dark about how to deal with the complications.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's historically been the case with everything as well. Steroids, for instance, the kind of data doctors had in the 70s and 80s was very limited because it was done, very backhandedly. And then when East Germany started doing anabolic steroids essentially on a whole scale, read a book, by the way, called Bounce by Matthew Said, which is a good adjunct to the Bounce. Matthew Said is an ex-table tennis champion from the UK. He now writes for the Times, but interesting book about the pursuit of excellence in amongst athletes, so athletic wellness and the pursuit of athletic medicine and aesthetic kind of objectives. How medicine has been turned on its head when it comes to that, and it's a good adjunct to the Netflix documentary Icarus, which I recommend everyone to watch. A really good insight into the lengths certain athletes go to achieve that body and achieve that kind of level of fitness. But anyway, going back to the point, so in the 70s and 80s, the data profile was, the data collection was quite limited, so doctors knew very little about it in terms of the bread and butter steroids. Now you've got Ecupose, you've got so many different kind of steroids now, and different kind of pro hormones and different stuff to take during cruising period, like the testo gels as well, which a lot of bodybuilders use. And now I think we're getting a knowledge gap as well. So even the endocrinologists, there's very few out there who are specializing in sports endocrinology, and that's what I've taken on myself, to actually read about this. And I'm even interested in doing a master's at Barts or UCL in sports endocrinology, because I think applying that to what I see on a daily basis can only be beneficial, because I see this stuff only getting more prevalent. So it used to be the reserve of elite bodybuilders. Now I'm seeing 45-year-old construction workers taking steroids because they want to keep up with a 22-year-old guy at the gym, and they want to keep up with Tommy from Love Island.
Well, that's just my gym that I go to. It's all 45-year-old construction workers with acne and big faces like that. It's just the standard. And yeah, like I think there has to be more of this because, as you said, like people, the private sector or the black market with these things is always so many steps ahead, or so pumping out new compounds all the time. And if you go to the GP and you say, I've taken my HCG and my testosterone's not come back up and I'm not getting erections anymore, and I feel like most GPs are going to be like, well, look, you've taken something that's completely off label, completely niche, and this is you're kind of on your own here. And
that's right. So that again goes back to the initial point we made at the beginning of the talk about that golf. And whenever you've got on golf, you've got something called a market pull. Okay, so the market pull is all these online supplement companies and bodybuilding forums, and these kind of wellness gurus and pseudoscience proponents who are using the market pull to lure a lot of these let's say recreational bodybuilders into their kind of entrapment of, yes, I will sort you out with blood tests, I will sort you out with a 12-week supply of this, and the GP is none the wiser. And even then, there's such a disconnect and disengagement, and kind of the patient feels disenfranchised when they go to their GP, because GPs have, bless them, not much of a clue about what they're taking, and that again just let's say reiterates their point that we are with the right people, who are these online guys, or the guys in the gym who have been doing steroids, so they become somewhat of a pseudo expert in that kind of field. So we, technically, this is our reserve. We should, as doctors, be, advising people about safe steroid use. It doesn't necessarily mean we agree with it. It just means we're advising them on when to stop, when to start, when to, go on replacement therapy, when to get their liver function test checked, when to get the ultrasound of the liver, when to even get echocardiograms, because that's important. You get hypertrophy of the left ventricle, so the main pumping outlet of the heart gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can quite easily die in sleep with that.
So that's a really interesting point, that by not taking ownership over these things, we've failed the patients in that sense, because then it ends up putting the pseudo experts into that position, whether they want to be or not, but actually they, as you said, there's a market pull to do so. So, and then the doctors are stepping back, and it's like, actually now the problem is being perpetuated, and just by saying we don't advocate this, that's not enough, or to try and like see no evil, doesn't mean that the activity stops. I've got a very religious family member that's very anti-abortion and believes that doctors or the NHS shouldn't offer it as a thing. And the problem there is not that whatever your thoughts on abortion are, it's not about like we just shouldn't offer it, because the market force is still pushing towards that being an activity, and if you don't cater to it, it pushes it into dodgy guys with a coat hanger in a back alley, like.
Yeah, of course. It's like, putting your hands over your eyes and, digging your head in the sand, and, it's not going to make the problem go away. The problem's still going to persist, and it's much better to be in our hands, whether that is, contraception, smoking, abortion, anabolic steroid use. It's much better to be in our hands as professionals with integrity and scientific knowledge than it is to be in the guy who's, a PT who's got a few clients and has also taken steroids himself, and I've got clients who are taking steroids, and he will just give anecdotal evidence here and there about his time as a steroid user, and will advise you very kind of vaguely about what to get checked, and what blood test to have. We should take ownership of that and avoid that black market proliferating, because I see it only proliferating, because with Love Island now twice a year, with the male body image being such a big issue, people will take more and more steroids.
Well, I really hope within the next couple of years, with the rise of biotech and tracking devices and blood test services and things, that we can hopefully start to crowdsource this pool of data and start to really advance medical science in a way that gets all of these tracking variables of people who are interested in health optimization, pooling it together and being able to draw out trends from the statistics. But I guess that's something that would have to be quite a big initiative for people to start tracking these things.
Of course, and I think that for that to take place, you need high-level thinking. And I think Matt Hancock, the health secretary, I think only yesterday, on Monday, suggested £140 million boost for digital health and AI in the NHS. So that's
cool.
So obviously, Conservatives have got another 4 years in government as of January. So that's a good time to start that now. So at least something good can come from this government, and digital health is the next frontier. And that's something I've started, with my company Endurance, where our website will go live tomorrow or on Thursday.
Nice.
But I'm client based essentially, and I've got data and parameters in place for from them, which they feed back to me: their calorie intake, their steps taken, what cycle they're on, what day of the cycle they're on, their sleep patterns as well. And a lot of these what we call bioinformatics are available quite easily via smartwatches, but via phones, via tracking apps like MyFitnessPal on on your smartphones. So I think pooling that is certainly the next frontier. I think a lot of the time people are getting their bloods checked privately, sending the printout to the GP. GP has no clue about that. And so with Endurance, what I'm trying to do is pull all the private results. We're doing our own blood testing as well. We're sending out kits to people's houses. They're sending it back to us. So we've got essentially a good client base, and a lot of it is in the so-called muscle gyms where people are, kind of backroom garages where it's freezing cold and you're paying £15 a month for these muscle gyms where everything's 30 years out of date. They're the gyms which, track the most problems, really.
Well, it would be ideal. Like, all the data is there just to be pooled, and like it's my wet dream for Apple to buy the NHS database and just sort it out, and just because considering it's all there, and rather than having to make the patient, as you said, carry a bit of paper to the GP, and then that even with it, maybe we're going off topic. Even within the same hospital, or within the same trust, trying to get all the data shared between departments for the same patient is sometimes close to impossible, and so it would maybe need a real restart. Maybe countries like Sweden and Norway are going to be the frontiers of this, because they always are. But I think if it does take off, it could be this just exponential improvement in the advancement of medical science, because suddenly we have so much more data and trends on a massive scale that we can then just run studies on and get to some great conclusions.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, the quicker we collect the data, the quicker we can analyze it, the quicker we can actually prevent diseases from occurring. So if you've got, for instance, going back to the point about bodybuilders and steroids, we've got sufficient data there about liver function and how your liver function will climb in the next 6 months taking steroids, how your kidney function will decline. We've got trackable biometrics here, haven't we? And we can prevent the onset of diabetes. We can prevent the onset of chronic kidney disease. We can prevent the onset of liver fibrosis by tracking 3 to 6 months. A lot of these guys were taking ergogenic aids, and that will prevent £20,000 a year cost on dialysis. £20,000 a year cost on all these diabetic medication, for instance.
It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Just to integrate a database.
It is.
You've solved all of this.
So my pals are doing a great job at Medichecks, a Nottingham-based company, and I think a lot of that.
Big fan of Medichecks.
Yeah, because they're based in Beeston, which is not far from where I live, and I'm quite a good friend with Sam Rogers, who's the main GP there. But we're trying to go a step further now and actually target the niche of bodybuilders, because I think that is going to be a big because there was a BBC documentary about 20 to 40% of people take it. Obviously, these are very the kind of interval ranges is quite huge, 20 to 40%, but we don't exactly know how many people take it, because people have taken it and then are going to take it in 2 years' time. But the active population is very common, and I think that's 1 or 2 million people. Really, that's a lot of people who are going to take anabolic steroids. So if we can slowly gather the data for them, put it in a database, obviously all encrypted and all confidential, we can certainly start picking up trends and treating people earlier before they have their triple artery bypass graft at age 35,
Yeah, exactly. Like being able to preempt those things by looking at the trends and seeing when are the points where complications start to kick in, and how can we start to then reverse engineer that and stop it from getting to the point where they need dialysis or bypass grafts. Yeah,
Because it's a simple, something as simple as it's a BMP, B-type natriuretic peptide in heart failure. So me and it's usually normal. In West African football, it's quite high. In bodybuilders, who are usually Caucasian, it starts off normal, but then exponentially rises, and that is essentially a precursor to full-blown heart failure. And because left ventricle's pumping, the hemoglobin side, so you've got a very high afterload as well, and you've got systemic vasoconstriction as well. From this is getting into quite a deep physiology now, but because you're a doctor, so they're essentially pumping treacle around the arteries, because it's so thick, hematocrit is so high with a high hemoglobin, which is blood thickness, and blood levels are very high because of anabolic steroid use, especially growth hormone. Growth hormone is an anabolic agent which will precipitate growth in and cause end organ damage in many organs, really, if it's taken in an uncontrolled fashion. Because growth hormone is secreted from the pituitary gland in a controlled fashion when needed. It is pulsatile. It's pulsed out when you need it. After a workout, it's pulsed when you need it. After a squatting session, etc., it's pulsed as and when you need it. Even after stressful events, it is secreted. But when you're taking it exogenously, it's constantly there. So hence why you get the horrible blood numbers. Even this morning, I had a couple of clients whose blood numbers are terrible. Hemoglobin is very high. Hematocrit is very high as well. So essentially what's happening is, going back to the BMP point, BMP is a precursor to left ventricular damage. And, if you're seeing a trend, you can quite urgently expedite a referral to cardiologists, and they can do echocardiogram and put them in medication to bring back their left ventricular function. And the secondly, as a doctor and as an exercise professional, you can advise them to deload their training.
I see.
And these are parameters on that we can use day-to-day practice. Why can't I do that with a tablet at the bedside, or sorry, at the gym side with a patient who's doing squats and his BMP is rising to almost 1,000? I can say, look, just deload, do some cardio, bring your BMP back to normal, and then we can refer you to a cardiologist. And that's something which I think will take trend in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, and it could even be built into the apps in the sense that once you have enough data, and you have a centralized database where you send off the bloods, and the app just gives you an automated notification saying, hey, your BNP's gone slightly above the reference range. We recommend that you deload your training a bit, or that you see a GP if it gets to this point, or what, so it can then be almost like the feedback loop can be contained within the app, and then you've put the power back in people's hands. Final question for you, Asif, is you've made a pretty good case for, if you're going to use these substances, it's at your own risk. The medical field hasn't caught up with the more kind of novel stuff, and you're at risk of these complications without really having a way to recover the complications if they happen. What would you recommend for? Because it obviously the main reason that people would take steroids, particularly non-high level competitive bodybuilders, just people who the average gym bloke who wants to gain a bit more muscle. What are the biggest low-hanging fruit that you see with people who have maybe started, but actually they could have squeezed out a lot more gains naturally? And also, what are they really seeking with this? Because it seems like one of the biggest industries is testosterone optimization, people trying to optimize it, but sometimes not really thinking that actually it's not the testosterone really that they're interested in. And we often tell people, if we have a client who's worried about their testosterone, and we're like, well, okay, what if your blood level of testosterone went up? How would you be any better? How would you feel any different? What you're really after here is more muscle and less fat, not necessarily the serum testosterone value here. So what do you see in terms of options for people who are convinced now that actually using these aids carries its own risks, and I want to just be able to maximize my physique naturally? What are your thoughts?
So go back to your first point about testosterone. I think that's important because a lot of people who don't have insights will just say testosterone is just a number. It's either 10 or 14. But it varies. It's highest in the morning, hence why you get morning erections. It's highest, it peaks. It's diurnal variation, just like melatonin. Just like your circadian rhythm, just like your cortisol, it rises in the morning and it falls after a meal. So your testosterone could be 12 before a big meal, then it'll be 10 or 8 after a meal. It can really vary quite 40% variations we have seen before. And also, testosterone, a bit like calcium, you have to look at a bound and unbound testosterone, okay? So, and a bioavailability. So, not to bore you with the biochemistry behind it, but you could have very high testosterone levels. You could have 20, for instance, but bioavailability could be 3 or 4, and you're getting depressed. You've got no libido. You can't get early morning erections, and you've got no strength, and you're putting on fat, and you're losing muscle. Okay, but doctor, my test levels are 20. But yeah, the bioavailability is very low, and also you've got to look at chronic stress as well. So cortisol, as we know, will drop your testosterone. It will drop it. So there's nothing wrong with your HPA, your hypothalamic pituitary axis. Just your cortisol is chronically elevated, and you've lost that diurnal variation. So at 9 a.m., where you've got the peak of cortisol, you're also chronically elevated because you're working 80 hours a week as a banker. Stop, reduce your hours, reduce your alcohol, increase your exercise, your test will increase by itself naturally. And there's no need for replacement. So a lot of people have made an industry from this, especially a few men's health clinics. So that's why we always offer expert advice. On our board, we've got endocrinologists who will look at your results and suggest repeat blood testing over 3 days. Anyway, that's just by the way. That was just talking about testosterone as just a pure level. Going back to your point about low-hanging fruit. Sorry, what was the question again?
So, what can someone do naturally in terms of the low-hanging fruit with the people that you see? Because I certainly see clients that are, a kind of simple example is someone who came to me, his physique was really average and his body fat was like 18-19%, but he was using 2.2 grams of testosterone a week, 5 IUs of GH every day, no cycling, and barely training. Diet was terrible, just going out drinking a lot, like not really sleeping much, and it's like the amount of cost benefit that you're getting here is so terrible.
Yeah, exactly, because you're spending all this money on all these supplements, and you're still not dieting, you're still not looking after yourself in the gym. So if it's a young client, 25, 30, under 35, as you know, testosterone, rises in 20s, at 29, 30, it plateaus till your late 30s, and 40s it declines by a few percent every decade, same as height does as well. So if it's a young guy in 20s and 30s, there's no reason why they can't achieve their optimal physique without the use of any ergogenic aids. There's no reason why. Okay. One thing is a caveat to that. It will take you a long time. It will take you looking at years. Okay. 2 years minimum, 8 to 10 years if you're a casual trainer, casual gym person. But you're looking at 2 years. Whereas with steroids, you're looking at 1 cycle, 2 cycles. For 3-6 months, you can achieve a very good physique. High muscle percentage. Very chiseled physique. Hypertrophied muscles with very little body fat. You're looking at 10% more with cycling, appropriate cycling, diuretic use. So the low-hanging fruit is there. I want to look good for a Marbella in June, doctor, and I've got 4 months to get there. So a lot of them will go on the cycles because they would have heard anecdotal evidence from the guys in the gym saying, guess what, I've lost so much weight, I've got so much muscle with this, and I'm better at training. My recovery is less, sleeping better, and I'm more aggressive, I can lift more, I'm stronger as well. So low-hanging fruit will always be there, but I think we have to educate the public that, all these bodies which you see on TV are, not necessarily you can't get 100% get that body, but you can be the best physique, that you could possibly be without the use of these steroid aids.
Cool. Well, that is a great message, and it's been fantastic talking to you because I think there's a huge amount of just untapped potential with nationally, with AI, with data collection, with the medical field as a whole, and I'm looking forward to seeing the trends of how things improve over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, certainly. No, I think one thing to watch out for is the ADAMS database. So, which is part of UCAD, so UK Anti-Doping Agency. They've got a database for kind of ergogenic steroids. So that's going to increase in the next 1 or 2 years. So, WADA and UCAD are working quite closely together to actually put a lot of substances on the ban list. So, going back to the beginning of the talk, cryptoheptadine, it could be on the ban list in a few months' time. So all changing, always changing. So I think that's part of it, data collecting, being a bit more insightful as to what people are taking. And a lot of it's hearsay. We hear in the gym, and then we can research it as well. But increasing the database first and foremost is the biggest step. Ensure we've got some hard endpoints to collect. But it's been great chatting to you.
I think so, because also when you've got these like when there's a delay between things being banned, there's often a case of like, oh, let's just create a slightly different isomer of this pro-hormone or of this and that, and they are completely untested and may have uncontrolled complications that just by change, but then it suddenly becomes legal. And I mean, I'm sure you saw the MCAT phase, like probably 2011, 2010, of like being sold as a plant fertilizer and everyone hammering it, and just like it's like, guys, if you're going to be taking an amphetamine, like at least take the one that's been around for 30-40 years, not just some completely new one.
Precisely. And I think as doctors and healthcare professionals, we need to be up to date. We need to be well read on this topic, because eventually a lot of the patients, when they come off these ergogenic aids, they'll come back to us, for advice. So we need to be or even during their course of treatment, they'll come to us with complications. So we need to be well versed in side effect profile, efficacy, and when to affect safe use. It's not if you're seeing a teenage girl, for instance, as a doctor in clinic, and she's having dangerous kind of sex or something, it doesn't mean you're promoting it by giving her contraception. It just means you're promoting safe use, or safe sex, or safe steroid use, or safe needle sharing, etc. There are companies out there like Juice Clinic in Sheffield that are doing some quite good work. I believe they've got a pump clinic in Manchester as well that are doing some good works. But these are far and few between. We need to make it the duty of every doctor to understand, basics of kind of, ergogenic use, because they are going to become common. I don't think we're far away from getting to a point where probably half the population will be using them, either to lose weight or to gain muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't be putting our heads in the sand. Got to at least educate ourselves on being able to mitigate the risks for our patients, and seeing where we go from there. Cool. Well, I hope filming with BBC goes well this afternoon. Pretty busy day for you. Yeah,
and it's a busy day for me. I need to refuel now with coffee and prayer.
Nice.
So that's my ergogenic aid.
That's your ergogenic aid. Ideal. So how can we find out more about you, and how what's the name of your business, and how can we access you?
Find us on all social media, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Endurance UK. And they can hit me up on Twitter and Instagram as well at Dr. Asif Official.
Dr. Asif Official. Cool. We will put that in the show notes for this podcast, as well as the clinic if you are around Nottingham.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, good. So 50 miles within Nottingham, we do home visits, and keep you up to speed with your wellness goals. So give us a follow. But Yusuf, it's been a pleasure speaking to you.
It has, bro.
Even better looking in real life.
Wonderful.
Because every time I see you, you're doing these random handstands, and I can only see some triceps. I can't actually see your face.
Yeah, that's. I think on night shifts when it's a bit quiet, doctor's office just becomes the handstand room. So, it's been good.
Good to see you. And,
you too.
Chat to you. I hope it's hope you found it useful. But keep in touch.
Absolutely. All right. Speak soon.
Okay. Thanks for that. Cheers. Bye.